Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Dev Diary 156, which is titled Metternich Spoke to Me, which you might be able to infer is going to be a German kind of oriented one, where we are going to be talking about Austria with the upcoming flavor for the upcoming patch on National Awakening is going to be the name of it. Now, this is written by Victoria, and we can tell because it's very long. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stall for time as we scroll through it just to show how long it is. Because we do, in fact, need to stall for time. So if you wanted to grab a drink of water, stretch out a little bit, we are going to be here for a while, so put your seatbelts on. Also, Hungarian stuff, too. We weren't kidding about needing to stall for time to show just how much scroll there is as we scroll. Now, it's not in the Dev Diary, but the patch/DLC, the free patch and the DLC, is going to be dropping on September 23rd. So if you want to mark your calendar for the release of National Awakening, that's going to be when it is dropping. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hello and happy Thursday. What's this? Happy Thursday, of course. But this is the first time, as far as I can remember, that Victoria has capitalized a happy. Normally, she does 1 to 2 Dev Diaries per patch, and she never capitalizes a Thursday, and then we make a joke about, well, it's not really a joke, the game is named after her, but we make a joke about how the game's named after her, which it actually is, and then we say she could do no wrong, but she's actually capitalized the Thursday. Or the happy. The Thursday is always capitalized, but it is, of course, a holiday, and we wish you all a happy Thursday, so it is right and just that it should be capitalized. This is Victoria, the narrative design lead of Victoria 3. I don't know how she worked it in the contract where they named the game after her, but shout out to her. And today I will be covering the first round of paid content contained in National Awakening. I will also be covering some additional free features and improvements that we ran out of space to in the last Dev Diary. Now, just for frame of reference, we're going to scroll a little bit faster here, but I just want you to know how much flavor there is. Maybe we should have worn our flavor wig, to talk about the flavor. And indeed, even though we're scrolling much faster, we still need to stall for time in regards to how much flavor there is. All right. Flava Flav would be proud. National Awakening is centered around the Austrian Empire and Balkan nations, with supporting content for the Ottoman Empire. Its central theme is the conflict between established dynasties, or is it dynasties, and aspiring nation-states. The vision of a universal monarchy embodied by the Austrian and Ottoman empires is placed in contrast with the particular ambitions of the Balkan nations. It's a nice little contrast. The victory of the latter requires the tearing of the former to pieces. Eat the rich, eat the monarchs. Transforming subjects into citizens divided by blood and language. Owners of National Awakening will be able to experience this conflict from both sides, the struggling against the nationalist onslaught as the Austrian Empire, or striving towards the national aspirations of the Balkan states. National Awakening contains quite a lot of narrative content. This is true. If we attempted to cover it all in a single Dev Diary, isn't that what you're doing? We would need to compromise on the image count and risk occupying the reader's entire evenings, a fate which I believe would be quite cruel. Is it cruel, Victoria? Oh, long Dev Diary writer? As I'm not a cruel person, citation needed. What is this citation? We will be splitting our coverage into 2 Dev Diaries. The first will be covering Austria. So this isn't even all of it. Bam! The first is Austria-Hungary with some generic content. I almost read generative. We gotta finish that book we've been reading on generative AI. It's gonna be out of date by the time we finish it. Whilst the second will cover the Balkan states, Montenegro, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece, as well as the supporting content we have added to the Ottoman Empire. So we will have the Age of Metternich. Following the death of Emperor France I, the Austrian Empire was left in a difficult position. For a half second, I read 1935, and I was like, that's not when he was assassinated, and that's also the wrong France. And that's France Ferdinand, not France the nation. The new emperor, Ferdinand the First and Fifth, First and Fifth. Wait, how's that? Okay, whatever. We'll continue. Was considered by both his late father and advisors to be incapable of effective governance. Womp womp. The will of late France the First hence constituted the Secret State Conference, a de jure advisory panel for the emperor, which would serve as the de facto ruling cabinet of Austria until the revolutions of 1848. state. The panel's members would include the Habsburg Archdukes Ludwig and Franz Karl, Counts Franz Annon von Kolowat Liebensteinsky, and Prince Clemens von Metternich. And so we will see Clemens, who we are going to apparently be very popular for an authoritarian. Let's see what we have. Master or experienced political operator. Fair enough. Someone call an ambulance, and it's probably for the Austrian monarchy. When one thinks of the Austrian Empire, Clemens is likely to be one of the first figures that comes to mind. As foreign minister of the Austrian Empire, he orchestrated marriages of Napoleon to an Austrian archduchess. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, or is this Napoleon or is this fake Napoleon? And chained this must be real Napoleon, and chaired the Congress of Vienna. As a state counselor in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, he developed a reputation as Europe's leading conservative statesman, dedicating much of his time to maintaining the post-Napoleonic geopolitical order. Wow, for whatever reason, post-Napoleonic geopolitical order really flows off the tongue quite nicely. Following the death of Emperor Franz I, he is widely regarded to have been the leading power in Austria, leading to a despotic government with zero tolerance for any liberal cause. How true is this narrative? Well, who won? Who won in the end? Was he victorious? If so, it's positive narrative. If not, negative narrative. How does one portray a figure like Metternich, who has been, I'm probably pronouncing this incorrectly, apologies, who's been alternatively slandered and lionized, condemned and exonerated, appraised and reappraised, first by his contemporaries and then by historians? First, we must understand the real conditions within which he existed. We must understand that Austria was not conservative because of Metternich, and Vienna, let alone all of Europe, did not bow to his whims. Yeah, it's the good old chicken and the egg thing, where like, which came first, the conservative or the conservative ruler or the conservative people type of thing, right? Where I think just in a general sense, people attribute where the powers that be, they attribute everything that happens to them, because it's easier to blame a figurehead than it is to blame like general cultural sentiment within a nation or something like this, or the sentiment of a large group of people. It is a more human thing to find one single person to blame, which is often what's done, like in the United States. No matter like what is happening in the nation currently, often the president gets blamed, even if he has like nothing to do with it. But okay, continuing on. Although presidents often have stuff to do with stuff, I'm just saying. For example, if yeah, let's not get into that. At least not right now. The Dev Diary is too long to have that tangent. Historical Austrian policy did not correspond one-to-one with Metternich's personal beliefs, which evolved over time. Within the Secret State Conference, Metternich had a limited portfolio centered around foreign affairs, and his influence within the Austrian court waxed and waned over time. Following the... Waxed and waned. Isn't waxing getting bigger? Oh, I mean, yeah, okay, that's correct. She's saying it got both bigger and smaller over time. Following what historian Wolfram Seaman referred to as a minor coup. That sounds like a nice little euphemism, like nuclear exchange, which is, a euphemism for horror and cataclysm. By France, Anton von Kolowat in the December of 36, Metternich was excluded from briefings and reports on domestic affairs, and matters such as finance and policing would become the exclusive purview of Kolowat. But past this point, the existence of a Metternich system within Austria itself becomes questionable. Conversely, we must understand that he was not an irrelevancy. The 19th century was perhaps the period in which the greatest amount of power was concentrated in the fewest number of hands. To ignore the role of individuals shaping the era would be a drastic overcorrection. Would it, though? Generally speaking, I think that grand narratives around individuals tend to get more lionized than they, or like more blamed for the movements of histories than what is appropriate. But let's continue on. I mean, it might be true that this is the time period in which the most power is concentrated in the fewest amount of hands, even if its narratives are often attributing too much to these people. Although, shout out to Napoleon. Although Napoleon might actually just be the perfect example of someone who's perceived as being all-powerful when a lot of the material conditions that allowed for Napoleon would have allowed for someone other than Napoleon had it not been Napoleon. But continuing on, prior to our period, he played an indispensable personal role in European diplomacy and Austrian policymaking, especially as it pertains to the diplomatic service. His historical marginalization at the hands of Collerat in 1836 greatly diminished his ability to affect Austrian policy, but he was still capable of actions such as blocking Archduke Karl from assuming supreme command of the Austrian army throughout the 1840s and facilitating the annexation of Krakow in 46. One may safely say that his term on the Secret State Conference was largely spent in dire political strengths, but to present him as a powerless courtier, shout out to Talleyrand, except not really, would be both a historical mistake and a waste of narrative potential. It is certainly the case that Metternich was a conservative, at times a reactionary for his time. He was an opponent of enlightened absolutism as embodied by the policies of Joseph II, favoring the traditional privileges of estates over autocratic power. He was an opponent of convening a central parliament, believing that doing so would inflame tensions between the Habsburg Empire's nationalities. In 47, he advised the King Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia to refrain from summoning the United Parliament on the same grounds. Despite opposing centralized autocracy, he was an advocate for rationalizing the functions of the imperial government, proposing a system of far-reaching reforms for the Secret State Conference, which would end in a disorganized system of ad hoc written communications with in-person cooperation between agencies. These reforms would largely never be realized, and the Austrian government would be placed into a long state of semi-paralysis between December of 1836 and the revolutions of 1848. Rough. Womp womp. So we do see a little bit of a minor coup, just the tip of the coup. Chancellor Clemens von Metternich does lose kind of his position. Let's see what kind of modifiers we get from here. Austria loses this modifier that's giving negative authority, +1 government size allowance, extra enactment time, and minus enactment chance. So that seems like a good modifier to lose. The extra government size allowance is a little bit interesting. So this is representing the council, we suppose. And then they indefinitely get extra power to the conservatives or the landowners, minus authority, extra enactment time, a little bit less negative enactment chance, and the autocrats are more likely to become, aristocrats are more likely to become radical. Okay, so this is a response to the conservative getting sidelined, is that the landowners will get a little bit more power and they're more likely to get radical, something like this. Economically, Metternich diverged from the reactionary mold in which he is often placed. Historically, he favored industrialization and closer economic ties between the Zollverein and Austrian empires, adopting an all-German perspective with regards to economic development, which is interesting. We've read about industrialization throughout this century from the lens of Great Britain, and one thing that's interesting is that Great Britain, there was some protectionism against Great Britain from the part of the Germans so that they could get their own industry up and running, and it's also interesting in that way that to think that free trade often benefits whoever is kind of the leader in terms of technology and production, and so Great Britain kind of espoused for a free trade type of way of looking at things because you benefit from having other markets with which to distribute your mass-produced goods, and this is kind of one of the foundations for getting industrialization going. But once it's going, it's not necessarily clear that you need external markets, but external markets help a lot initially, or mass markets. And so when you have Great Britain exporting stuff to your nation, you effectively are decreasing your mass market, right? Which makes it harder to get things going because they are effectively stealing demand for your goods. So let's see what we have to say about some of this stuff. In 41, he proposed the ambitious program of free trade, womp womp, domestic infrastructure development and integration of Austrian and North German railway systems. So much for the protectionism against Great Britain specifically. I think it's specifically in steel and iron and coal and this type of thing. As with his government reform, this would encounter fierce resistance from Collorat's critique, coming down to nothing in the end. So we did get the protectionism. Towards the end of his career, one may say that he had joined the tradition of doomed modernizing reformers whose proposals came came too little and too late. Metternich, for all of his personal intricacies, serves as an iconic device from which we may create a narrative. The age of the Metternich journal entry, available for Austria at the game start, uses him as a lens to present historical priorities of the Austrian government through the Vormars period. And we do see this journal entry. The aftermath of Napoleonic Wars established Austria as a leading conservative power in Europe. I think that this kind of reads a little bit like we've just read through. His agenda calls for an upholding of the Austrian autocracy and the maintenance of the conservative peace in Europe and promotion of the arts and sciences. And so what do we want in order to do this? Realizing the various items on Metternich's agenda will improve the effect of the journal entry. These achievements will be scored upon this journal entry successfully completing. And wow, this is like so cool that we have... So it's interesting, we've been in the EU5 streets watching discussion for some time, and one thing that people really like that I'm not as sold on is mission trees, because it gives you a bunch of things to do and kind of pushes you in like a little bit of a historic direction. And so it's interesting that we have a bunch of things that we want to check, and so this can kind of push you in a particular direction and give you stuff to do that's themey and something you can lean into. We have prevented Italian unification. Germany's not been unified by another country. Austria is the leading producer of fine art, nice for getting prestige. Austria owns the state region of West Galicia. Galicia. We're just got done covering Spain, so we Galicia'd it. And then Austria had researched 52 technologies, so that's not too hard to get. Metternich's system has more than 12 members, currently 9. Just need to subjugate some people, right? Interestingly enough, the power block system, as it relates to subjugation, is kind of a little interesting. Because I think that, to some extent, a lot of what you're doing in terms of the power block or the benefits you get are like, you really gain a lot from just subjugating people, especially in South America, and maybe you should gain much more from people in your block that are not subjects or something like this, because the really straightforward way is to just kind of ignore pulling people into your block for the most part and just subjugate in order to get members. And so here we have, we don't have to diplomatically pull in a bunch of members, we just have to subjugate three people. The cohesion of the system is greater than 75, so this will make it a little bit harder, so you don't want to subjugate people who are going to lower cohesion. If I remember correctly, the Metternich system is ideological union, and so people having radically different laws is going to make things a little bit rougher, so that's a little bit of an interesting constraint. And also, this is kind of nice because it encourages you to keep your initial starting block, because this block isn't very good, or the block type ideological union is not very good, if I recall correctly. All liberal or socialist political movements have marginal support, so you might have to do a little bit of stamping those down. Austria has autocracy, censorship, and secret police. Home affairs and law enforcement institutions are 3 or higher. So we have kind of we have some flavor for being this conservative power, and it'll be interesting if this is worth it, because very often I think liberalizing is good, and it'd be cool to see some things that push you in the direction of being a little bit more conservative that are actually effective. We'll complete if Franz Joseph becomes an adult, basically, and he becomes Kaiser. Doesn't work if he doesn't, I guess. And then we get, he will peacefully retire, triggers the end of an age, and will fail if any Austrian political movement is revolutionary. Oh, that's real easy to fail then, isn't it? Austrian aristocracy have been in opposition for more than 6 consecutive months, and he is not the leader of the Austrian aristocracy. So maybe a little bit of a difficult one, or maybe not so difficult, but you do have to play around it quite a bit, right? If you have to avoid revolutions. But the journal entry contains 10 sub-goals themed around his foreign and domestic ambitions. If one chooses to pursue his agenda, maintaining Austria's status as the heart of conservative Europe will receive rewards of a strength proportional to the number of goals, completed sub-goals. And following up on the theme of conflicted historiography, a differing parting thought. So we will have the great conductor exits the stage, and so do we see the scaling? Exactly how much it is? I guess we don't see the scaling. I'm going to assume that this is max scaling up here, where we get for 10 years his legacy, 15% Austrian aristocracy, political strength, not really that great, 20% prestige, or sorry, 20% influence. Influence is kind of an okay resource, and 15% prestige. Overall, not any kind of insane modifiers, but just generally speaking, Victoria 3 tends to try and avoid those, especially on powers that are big. They really, there are some really insane modifiers for like Persia, Afghanistan, Circassia, they got rid of one of the really big modifiers on Ethiopia. Ethiopia used to have Tewodros with plus 30 offense, and that has been since removed. I was kind of a fan of it, but it definitely makes sense to remove it because that's just an insane kind of stat line. But I forget exactly what the bonus for, I think like Circassia just gets this massive defensive bonus. Afghanistan gets additional government dividends reinvestment. Persia, if I recall correctly, gets manufacturing throughput for like 20 years, and 20 years is like that's 20% of the game's length, and by the time you get it, it's like 1/3 of the remaining game's length. So that's really, really substantive. I think someone just gets 5% throughput somewhere, but that's going to be too big a modifier for someone that's big. They just don't like giving that to people who are big. So I suppose that makes some sense. Just in terms of design philosophy. One may also choose to follow the historical outcome, sending him his way from Vienna with the revolutionary mob at his heels. And then here we get, he changes to modernizer and he bails. He toots it and he boots it, except he probably didn't get to toot it. Yeah. Poor Metternich never got to hit it. Historically, this was not the end for him. After the revolution, he fled to England, where he hosted many influential visitors, launched a short-lived newspaper endeavor, and became increasingly fond of British press and parliamentary system. He spoke positively of both the Tory and the Whig parties, viewing them to be organic groupings naturally arisen from British society, whilst condemning the continental European political parties as artificial constructs born of pure ideology. Sounds like a hater, huh? To the late Metternich, Germans were simply not civilized enough to possess a parliamentary system. He would later move to Belgium, and during the neo-absolutism period, back to Vienna, where he'd live out the rest of his days in retirement. It kind of reminds me vaguely of Nietzsche, who, I forget which of his books it was. I want to say maybe it was in on genealogy and morals. Maybe it was Beyond Good and Evil. But he rips really hard on Germany, and he is German, but he lived in Switzerland. And one of the ones, like the lines, is like one of my favorite Nietzsche quotes. Is he's just like, "The German Tsar is unfit to be my stagecoach," which is just like a wild aside to have in the middle of just like this, philosophical kind of thing. Although the way Nietzsche wrote was via aphorism, which is kind of like, it was tweeting before Twitter was a thing, and so it's kind of fitting to just randomly have just shade thrown at the ruler of Germany, but it is a quote that I like quite a bit. But continuing on here, the revolutions of 1848 brought the Austrian Empire to the brink of collapse. Revolutions in the empire's Italian provinces brought Austria into war with a coalition of Italian states at the same time of the Hungarian Revolution, or revolutionary government launched its War of Independence. For a time, Vienna, Milan, Venice, and Budapest were all in the hands of revolutionaries, and the Austrian court was forced to flee to Innsbruck. It took the combined efforts of Austria, Russia, and Prussia to crush each rebellion and restore imperial authority to every corner of Austria. In the waning days of the revolution, it's interesting that everyone kind of came together on this one, eh? But this was the alliance back in the day. In the waning days of the revolutions, the newly enthroned Emperor Franz Joseph I launched a series of decrees which granted him absolute power, abolished the Diet of Hungary, and partitioned the former Kingdom of Hungary into several military districts. This marked the beginning of Neo-Absolutism, a period in which the Emperor and Viennese bureaucracy embarked on a radical program of centralization. Wow, there's going to be so much flavor here. The Neo-Absolutists, exemplified by the Interior Minister, Alexander Bach, sought to abolish the traditional privileges of the crown lands, instating an authoritarian unitary regime that sought to marginalize the nationalist sentiments through economic growth and quality governance. Is this actually just going to have so much more flavor than... I think the last flavor patch we had was 1.8 for the India thing. Is there actually just going to be so much more stuff? Man... It just, like, the pacing, like, seems like there's going to be so much more stuff. If, like, every 10 years we have a different journal entry for just, like, Austria, and Austria is only one of the nations that's giving coverage, and, like, you're also going to have stuff for the Balkans and all this other stuff. Obviously, Austria's presumably going to have the most content, but this actually just seems like there's so much more than what we got with India, and definitely more than 1.3, which was... the France flavor patch. I think those are the two major flavor patches. Technically, I think 1.5 was the South America one, but for the most part, that was like a massive overhaul free patch that had like a bunch of other stuff going on as well. But continuing here, the Autocracy in the Age of Liberty journal entry provides this neo-absolute flavor to this neo-absolutist period. It is enabled for the autocratic Austria that has both successfully eliminated all of its crown land subjects, or that has both successfully eliminated... Wait... What's the other thing both is modifying here? Autocratic Austria that has both successfully eliminated all of its crown land subjects. I suppose this is what was the idea, is that's both autocratic and successfully eliminated all of its crown land subjects is probably the intention. The neo-absolutist project's emphasis on empowering the bureaucracy and achieving social peace through the power of the state is very much in line with the spirit of the Austrian Biedermanner, and so one may choose to pursue this journal entry with either a petite bourgeoisie inclined monarch such as Franz Joseph or a petite bourgeoisie government in here. And so we will see constitutional pressure is negligible. We will have a couple of buttons to click: abolish feudal obligations, marginalize the crown land diets, accept a papal concordiant. Very interesting. So we're appeal to the papacy, and it will complete if we have four things. The GDP is greater than 22 million. That's pretty achievable. 22.8. The loud car outside. The fraction of a million, or the decimal, is kind of an interesting... Sometimes people play music loud outside, and I'm always worried about getting DMCA'd over the music. But it's interesting that there's a fraction in there, or that it's a portion of one. Rather than... It's going to get very hot. You're going to see me sweat as we go on. Rather than, like, a round number, I wonder if this is... When you hit the journal entry, it's just going to be a % gain over what you had before. But we also have all of these. Our power rank must be within the top 3. Austria has a higher GDP than Prussia. Austria has enforced a war goal on Prussia while this journal entry is active. What's going on here, Victoria? Aren't you writing these? Why is this a while and not a whilst? Something's up. I smell foul play. But we have marginalized the crown-led diets, we have accepted the papal concordiant, and we've abolished feudal obligations. And so, if completed, we enable neo-absolutism autocracy in the distribution of power. Interesting. So we unlock a new law. Now this is something we're on board with, right? This is what's going on? We're unlocking a new law, and we'll fail if constitutional pressure gets high enough. We have established Austria-Hungary, and we don't have any variant of Austria enacted, or autocracy. My bad, Freudian slip. Shout out to Freud. Freud was Austrian, was he not? Pretty sure he was. Someone's going to correct me if I'm wrong. And secret police enacted. Probably your mother. Shout out to keeping it in the family with Freud. To successfully complete this journal entry, one must successfully complete 4 out of 5 conditions before the constitutional pressure gets too intense. You know what else is intense? Camping. Constitutional pressure abstracts the various conditions which led to the historical fall of the neo-absolutist regime. From the passive resistance of the Hungarian political establishment to the military defeats of Prussia and Italy. We will have constitutional pressure, and we will see how it's gained. Represents strength and influence of the opposition to the neo-absolutist regime, and is tied to the perceived authority of the regime. Should the constitutional pressure reach 100, the neo-absolutist government will fall, and a constitution will have to be granted. And so, what will increase pressure is having a war goal enforced on you, yikes. Declaring bankruptcy, yikes. Taking loans. We talking just having debt? Yikes. Yikes. Don't they know that's what you're supposed to do? That's how you're supposed to play. I actually think putting more pressure on being in debt such that it's more of a decision is maybe an interesting thing. But I also think that just deficit spending should generally be good, but wouldn't hate to see it be bad for a journal entry such as this. And maybe this is, giving power to a state when instead you do want it centrally located. We have interest groups opposing autocracy, activism of liberal, socialist, and other national political movements. This is another factor in the previous journal entry, so we're going to see maybe it's going to be suppressing movements is going to be something that you look to do a lot of as Austria, which would be very cool if, right now, there's not a huge variance in the way you approach things between nations, but it would be interesting if Austria, for example, as a result of various incentives, you really want to be suppressing interest groups quite a lot because of the rewards you get for these journal entries, and then on the same time, you go secret policed and you're encouraged to go secret police, so it's helping out because secret police, if I recall correctly, or this is maybe censorship. I think it's censorship, actually. Increases the efficacy of your suppressions. And so the stuff kind of fits nicely together where the tools you are getting are more effective for the route that you're going, and then the route that you're going you get rewards for to promote a different gameplay pattern. But they also just generally don't like giving too strong incentives. This reward we get here for completing this just isn't playing suboptimally to achieve this is just not worth it from a min-maxy perspective, but you're playing for the flavor, right, rather than the efficacy. It's like when you eat pizza, you're not eating it for the macros, although Costco cheese pizza does have a lot of protein. They put a lot of cheese on that, a lot of mozzarella cheese, and mozzarella cheese is actually not very high in fat, unlike cheddar and jack. But the neo-absolutist period has a highly Catholic character, with clerical absolutism and neo-absolutism being largely synonymous. In 1855, Alexander Bach signed a concordiant with the Pope that granted the Catholic Church greatly expanded authority within the Austrian Empire, especially over education. Signing this concordiat was one of the possible ways to make the journal entry move towards completion. What does it do here? Well, we do have to have good relations with the Pope, man, and it will increase constitutional pressure. Interesting that it puts pressure on you, but this is something you have to do. Relations go up. You enable state religion, and you enable religious schools. Wow, you just get to flick them on instantly? Huh. I forget what Austria starts with. If Austria starts with none of this stuff, this actually might be pretty solid. And you gain a bunch of leverage in the Papal States. Interesting. So you can try and pull them into your block. Other priorities of the regime are disempowering the Crownland Diets and completing the abolition of feudal obligations, such as the widely despised robot. where we will try and abolish this. We have to have not manorialism enacted. I believe that is their flavor of serfdom, and does not have crownland diets enacted. I forget where crownland diets is located, but we will see what this will do is it will decrease the constitutional pressure. So this one increases, this one decreases. Curious. And we will for 5 years have to pay out 4K. Nice little thing to have in here. I'd probably rather see it in buy orders of paper. Just government demand buy orders of paper than just raw government expenses. This is one thing I actually really like about Victoria is like the economics is like entirely like grounded through goods almost always, and so it's really nice when you see that. And so flat expenses just generally, if they were buy orders for something like paper, I think that'd be slightly preferable. We get increased bureaucratization, 5% bureaucracy, 5% education access for 5 years. That's not going to push the needle too much because it operates at well, it'll make your equilibrium come up faster, I guess. But the thing is like, I think it almost takes 5 years to get up to this like 5% anyways, or more than 5 years. But we haven't done a very close look at how long it takes. We just know that increased education access operates on an equilibrium, so you don't get it instantly, or you don't get the extra literacy instantly. We will get minus political strength and approval from the aristocracy, and a little bit for the landvolk. That's folks with a that's folks with a K. Or sorry, with a V. If one can successfully complete the journal entry, they will be rewarded with a unique distribution of power law, representing the refined and entrenched neo-absolutism system. We put an extra S in there, I think. This serves as the variant of autocracy that grants even more authority and favors bureaucrats over aristocrats. Interesting. So bureaucrats favored is not so bad. Bureaucrats will actually be intelligentsia at a decent clip. I actually don't even know what they generally are. I'm pretty sure they're generally petite bourgeoisie and secondarily intelligentsia. But plus 50 more authority is going to make this the highest authority one in the game. Now, if I recall correctly, distribution of power rather than voting system includes the corporate state, which gives you an extra company slot. And as long as that gives you an extra company slot, there's no way that this is ever good. But, relatively speaking, but is this better than autocracy? It probably is significantly better than autocracy. And it also unlocks command economy, which is great if you're a newbie and you want to get baited into a terrible law. Yeah. Command economy is still awful. If one fails to entrench this system, one will come to the historical outcome. The government's creditors will lose patience with the neo-absolutist project and demand that it issue either a constitution or have its credit cut off. Yikes. So the debt being a factor definitely makes a lot of sense. I kind of would like to see more variation in terms of pressures on the player, though, to move them in various directions. That way you play a little bit differently as depending on who you are. And the fact that maybe you don't want to take credit or debt as Austria is an interesting one. At this point, one may either choose to do as they wish or suffer a sharp increase in interest rates. How sharp are we talking? Accept the demands. Stability comes first. All right, fair enough. And then we will have the founding period, or Gründerzeit, which was a time of great speculation and economic growth within the German states. And during this time, the development of the German railway system and liberalization of corporate law led us to an explosion of the amount of enterprises founded each year. The frenetic economic tempo of this period would continue until the Panic of 73, a stock market collapse that would so severe that the term Great Depression was first used to describe it. So this will be a journal entry. Will activate if 75% of German countries have researched mutual funds and have at least one railway. Okay. The Gründerzeit is a journal entry shared across all German states representing a free and wild speculation of the era. Whilst this journal entry is active, all German states will contribute to its goal to increase their collective GDP by 2.5% a quarter. 2.5% a quarter. God, I wish I had a frame of reference of how achievable this is in Vic 3. I'm pretty sure this is easy, like super turbo easy, but I'm trying to think. Well, first of all, it's collective GDP, but if you're a majority of the GDP, the fact that it's collective becomes less relevant. I'm just trying to think if I can remember how much growth... I haven't looked at growth rates and like growth numbers, I think, at any point like in the recent history, so I just like can't assign the numbers, and I don't want to do math while recording a video, because you never do math while recording a video, so let's just continue. At the beginning of this period, one may choose the degree to which one wishes to commit to the Gründerzeit, taking on various amounts of financial risk depending on the options one chooses. Buy, invest, expand. That's triple exclam, so you always click that one. And so what we will get, we must grow 2.5% a quarter. The journal entry bonus will be stronger. Oh, I love flying close to the sun. Hell yeah. But so will any subsequent crash. Hell yeah, brother. We get minus 20% movement political attraction and extra 20%, wowza, contribution efficiency. And here we see the milder one, which is just going to give less of the bonus, but the crash is not as bad. Okay. I hear you. I see you. While the Gründerzeit is ongoing, the German states will be expected to maintain consistent quarterly GDP growth of at least 2.5%. Although, here's the thing. Bro, what if you have funky business with your market? Is this going to be the first time we get to simulate a market crash? So here's the thing is, like, you can definitely annualized maintain 2.5% growth quarter, I think. But having one bad quarter is not that hard, right? If you have a funky war, or your convoys get raided, or someone big leaves your market for whatever reason, or even if like if you're highly dependent on trade with Great Britain, and trade with Great Britain implodes because they do something weird in a war where they lose market access in India because it's funky with the convoys, because that system like maybe isn't working the way it should, and it can happen fairly often that you lose market access to like all of India. Something like that makes it grow, you grow like 2.4% and you fail, or something like this. That is kind of exciting in terms of how it's simulating. 4 out of 4, it says. So maybe you just have to not miss 4. Here, let's continue reading. Failing to meet this target for any given quarter will decrease the progress bar, representing declining investor confidence. Failing 4 quarters in a row. Okay, so you have to fail 4 quarters in a row. That's a bit harder to do. We'll trigger the panic that historically put an end to this period. If one manages to maintain this consistent inflating bubble for 30 years in a row, one will successfully ride out the Gründerzeit without experiencing the subsequent hangover. It's called day drinking, sweetie. That's the real way to do it. See, the thing is someone call an ambulance, and this is for the people who drink at night, because, actually, we probably shouldn't YouTube discuss it for monetization reasons, but it basically really messes with your REM sleep, right? And so if you drink during the day, and you're sober by the time you go to sleep, then you don't mess with your sleep. Shout out to sleep. I wish I had more. We believe that it is entirely reasonable to expect an economy to maintain 30 years of uninterrupted growth, and have staked our entire life savings on this. Yes. So I'm not sure how much teeth this will have, but this is the first instance we have of, economic collapse, this type of thing. I don't think they showed what happens when you fail, though, which I'd be very curious on. Yeah, I guess we just don't get to see that. I wonder what it is. Maybe decreased investment pool contribution, something like this. But okay, next up, the Triple Monarchy. The Kingdom of Croatia has existed as an autonomous unit within the Hungarian portion of the Habsburg monarchy since the 16th century. Historically, the Austro-Hungarian Compromise was soon followed by the Croatian-Hungarian Compromise, which confirmed the self-governing status of the Croatian Sabor, and legally merged the lands of Croatia and Slavonia, not to be confused with Slovenia. Croatia existed as an autonomy within Hungary from 1867 to 1918, after which it briefly achieved de jure status as a third co-equal crown within the collapsing Habsburg monarchy. The situation lasted for only 1 week, womp womp, after which Croatia and Sabor voted to terminate the union and declare independence from Austria as a constituent state of Slovenes, Croats, or Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. Croatian independence from Hungary and the establishment of a South Slavic unit within the empire has long been a demand of Croatian nationalists. The first expression of this demand within our time period was the Illyrian movement of the 1830s and 40s, and a political current amongst the Croatian Intelligentsia calling for an establishment of a unified South Slavic state within the Austrian Empire. Its demands included the unification of Croatia, Slavonia, and Dalmatia under a single true kingdom, a separation of Croatia from Hungary, and use of the Croatian language in the Croatian Sabor. Activists of the monarchy may also be credited with the developed popularization of the Croatian literary language. The Austro-Hungarian Compromise, which set precedent for separate crowns under the Austrian Empire, created hopes amongst South Slavs for a triple monarchy between Austria, Hungary, and Croatia. This political current would be referred to as the Trialism, and its supporters include the two ill-fated heirs of the Austrian crown, Crown Prince Rudolf and the Archduke of France Ferdinand. I hope nothing bad happens to him. If one chooses to establish the dual monarchy through the matter of Hungary, journal entry, and Hungary is choosing to be uncooperative, one may choose to create a third crown through a decision to issue a Trialist manifesto. The Trialist manifesto will split Croatia from Hungary and transform Austria-Hungary into Austria-Hungary-Croatia, which is all too many syllables, which is why we don't recommend doing this journal entry. But think of how long your name will be over your nation. Just whoosh. But it won't be tall, just long, which that's what counts. Such a measure, however, will require Hungarian approval, and this may prove difficult to acquire. So we have to have Croatia's not primary culture. At least one of these relations with Austria are less than or equal to 0. Wait, this is requirements? But this says we have to... requires Hungarian approval. This doesn't look like having Hungarian approval. Relations with Austria are less than or equal to 0. Isn't this greater than? Okay, I'm confused here, but let's just continue on. Once this decision is taken, Hungary will receive an event in which they may choose to veto the manifesto. If Hungary does so, Austria will be faced with a choice of their own. Under the terms of the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, the Austrian Emperor has no legal recourse to enforce a decision to Hungary. Will they cease their pursuit of the Triple Crown, or will they make use of an illegal appeal to force? Yeah. A military intervention was not out of the question. Historically, by the 20th centuries, tensions between Austria and Hungary had developed to the point where Franz Ferdinand was intended to do precisely this upon taking the throne, breaking the dualist structure of the empire and forcing the introduction of universal suffrage in Hungary at gunpoint. Yeah. If Hungary consented to the manifesto, or if Austria can successfully enforce a war goal on it during the enforced Trialist manifesto diplomatic play, Croatia will be established as a new personal union subject of Austria, and the dual monarchy will become a triple monarchy. So you'll have a subject of a subject, turtles all the way down. And so we will have Hungary be a subject of Croatia, and I think Hungary is a subject of you. If one establishes a triple monarchy, Croatia will be typically more amicable to the imperialist interests than Hungary will be. This will be quite useful if one seeks to pursue the next step in reforming the empire, the United States of Greater Austria. The federal solution. In 1906, Aurel Popovici published The Greater States of Greater Austria, an ambitious proposal to reorganize the Austro-Hungarian Empire into a Greater Austria with 15 federal districts. The proposal swiftly attracted attention amongst a circle of radical reformers that surrounded Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne at the time. Hopefully nothing bad happens to him. It is important to note that Popovici's proposal was essentially a conservative one, on, with the objective being the dismemberment of Hungary and the maintenance of the Habsburg dynasty. To Popovici, the Hungarian state was dominated by a Kossuthist revolutionary conspiracy which sought to subvert the Habsburg Habsburg Empire, and transform the various nationalities of Hungary into uniform mass through Magyarization. Furthermore, he believed that this homogenization was the natural result of cosmopolitan democracy, and that nationalism was necessary to resist the homogenizing impulse of the state. What? Okay. Isn't nationalism kind of... Okay. Well, I guess it's not. It's about otherizing within the South, but also a single... Anyways, the proposal for the United States of Greater Austria was hence heavily focused upon ethnic autonomy, drawing borders along very precise linguistic lines. Yeah, this is where the lack of homogenization comes in. We're dividing based on ethnic borders. Just we have an idea of which one is best or something like this. In designating its federal units by ethnicity. Whilst other proposals for the federalization of the empire existed, such as Lejeune Kossuth's plan for organization of a Republican Danubian state circa 1848, and the territorial federalization supported by the Austro-Marxists, Marxists, we have deemed Popovici's United States of Greater Austria to be the most feasible. This journal entry is thus flavored around a more conservative approach. If Austria is formed the dual or triple monarchy, it will receive a proposal for federalization of a monarchy upon researching pan-nationalism. Declining the proposal will dismiss the relevant journal entry and enable a decision which will allow one to reconsider at any time one wishes. That's kind of nice. So we can't hope to do it now, but later maybe. The federal solution journal entry allows one to build up their own United States of Greater Austria. In order to succeed in this journal entry, one must assemble both a coalition of nationalities willing to sign onto the project and get one's applicable personal unions, crown lands, and puppets to cooperate. And so you have to address the concerns of all the constituent members, or maybe just a majority, but you can see here all the nationalities in here. I wonder if this is dynamic or if this just refers to kind of like the Austrian proper territory. And by Austrian proper, we mean Austria and like Hungary and Slovenia and Romania, but we're going to call it Austria proper, which will probably upset some people. And like, if you take a chunk of China, will China be in here? Probably not. But maybe it's dynamic and updates in that way, in which case, or maybe it updates based on what's incorporated. So if you incorporate a Chinese state, then you have the Han people who you need to appease as well. Something like this. I imagine this is, if it is dynamic, it's based on homeland. In terms of whose concerns you have to address. But once this proposal is accepted, all Austrian crown lands and personal unions will receive a journal entry of their own, allowing them to choose whether to combat or assist the formation of the United States of Greater Austria. If one has a powerful personal union with high liberty desires, such as Hungary, one may need to accede to the particular demands of the dominant cultures, possibly throwing other cultures the wind in the name of securing cooperation. If a subject is especially... Also, if I recall correctly, there isn't a good way to annex personal unions. I'm trying to remember exactly how that works, but I don't think you can annex a personal union. So this is the only way you could reunify, right? If you get put into having them as personal unions, other than releasing them and then going after them. So I do think there's probably pretty solid reason to do this, other than releasing just might be better or something like this. If a subject is especially uncooperative, of course, that they may be unwilling to accept even that. In such cases, extraordinary measures may be necessary. Hungarians reject integration. We will need to make do without them. We will see that they become disqualified from further integration, and this hurts relations, and a negative event, diplomatic catalyst, is triggered. Super cool. I hope that this is actually in more spots. There's a lot of things that cause negative diplo catalysts, and I feel like people don't understand what's going on when that happens, and like kind of how they're kind of a big deal because they shift attitudes. But at the same time, you just need to join a war on the same side as someone in order to reset attitudes. So maybe it's not that big a deal. Like if Great Britain starts to decide that they have a bad attitude towards you, just wait until they declare war and then join on their side. It resets the attitude. But I do think that in general, this is something that is under-conveyed to the player when there is going to be a diplomatic catalyst. To assemble a collection of nationalities, one must address their grievances with other cultures, draw the map of the future United States of Greater Austria. My brain just auto-completes America so hard whenever I see United States. It's such a head trip to read this in a manner that is advantageous to them. If it is not possible to get every culture on board, one must be strategic and try and maximize the number of integrated cultures, whilst disqualifying as few cultures as possible. Maximizing the number of integrated... Does this affect what territory you're getting, or does it affect what your primary cultures will be? An integrated culture is someone who's willing to cooperate with the federalization project, becoming a primary culture of Austria and counting towards the completion requirement. So the completion, I'm guessing, is proportion of population, whilst a disqualified culture is one that is unwilling to cooperate under any circumstances. Fascinating. So, more primary cultures. Wow. There's certainly some cultural diversity, so this seems pretty cool what we got going on here. But we have addressed the Slovak concerns. The lands inhabited by the Slovak people have long been organized under the Hungarian crown and have been subjected to intense Magyarization, policies that have stunted the growth of their national identity. In addition to this, Czech and Slovak nationalists have been historically maintained close relations with the establishment of the Czech-Slovak entity advocated for by some. To successfully integrate the Slovaks into the federation, it is necessary to partition the region off from Hungary and devise a solution for an unresolved question here. So we have a time limit. We can only do 2 a year, roughly. And then in terms of using the interaction, we need to get acceptance high enough to be able to do it. So you have to kind of move against what your starting conditions are. I don't think there were journals... I'm trying to remember. I don't think there were previous journal entries that specifically required ethnic discrimination. There were just like autocratic and secret police and censorship, those types of ones. So you should be able to move towards this type of thing earlier on. Austria has not enacted any variant of subjecthood, so you have to have a national identity instead of this dynastic identity, as we learned about in the last dev diary. And they also have to have any Austrian subject or their subjects, a Slovak as a primary culture in their country. And then we have to have low radicals, no active secession, this type of stuff, which should be fairly easy if you go multiculturalism, cultural exclusion type of stuff, or your less discriminatory laws, and triggers the fate of Slovakia. Each button will give a choice on how to address the given culture's demand. To integrate one culture will often disqualify another. Oof. It does sound like the Balkans. Or at least radicalize a portion of the culture's population and worsen relations with the subject of that culture. Furthermore, if one violates promises that they have already made, the betrayed culture will immediately become disqualified and spawn a much larger amount of radicals. So we see this is going to be Brotherland, and we want to grant them all of East Galicia in order to appease the Ukrainians, I think. Polish pops in Austria and its non-Polish personal union and crown land will become more radical, so you upset the Poles. Austrians get more on board. They become integrated, becoming a primary culture of Austria. Polish will be disqualified from future integration. So you have to pick and choose. Wow. Everyone's... There's going to be a lot of happy people who love excluding, and they're like, we want them out. In terms of their flavor, you're going to be able to exclude cultures, but interesting give and take. I assume you just want to go for the highest pop ones, but maybe there's reason to play it otherwise, especially given that they are expanding the cultural groups to like care about have multiple things going on also related to like language and this type of thing. And so maybe there's a strategic reason why you would want to pick a lower pop group over a higher pop group for like coverage, because it increases more overall aggregate acceptance, something like this, maybe. Once one has assembled a coalition of nationalities, one may sign the federalization law, locking in one's current coalition. At this point, one must either get one's subjects into line or cut loose ends to save them as a whole. Completing the journal entry will annex all of their applicable subjects and change the country's name to United States of Greater Austria, with a pleasing marble gray BAP color and extremely interesting flag. It will also... extremely interesting flag. This seems like it might be code for something. We'll see it in just a second, I suppose. It will also grant the Danubian tradition to all the cultures within the homelands within the Union's territory, granting even those who could not initially be integrated an acceptance boost. So that is going to be nice, which kind of makes it probably more about the pops, but I guess also about the territories. Is that the flag? It's just kind of like the Austrian flag plus? What's so interesting about the flag? It's just Austria plus, no? Okay. Hungarian movement on an insurmountable obstacle to federalization, and it just boosted out of the empire. As a result, Hungarian culture did not get the Danubian tradition trait. Looks like we also left Romania, Monty, and Bulgaria on the table. Yikes. It seems like a bad outcome for us. We have the Sanderstadt. In 1891, Pope Leo XIII published the Rerum Novarum, an encyclical addressing the conditions of the working class. This, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word, encyclical, detailed the Catholic approach to the social question, outlined the duties of the capital. I'm sure I've heard this word or seen this word before, though. The duties of capital and labor to support one another, and expressed support for workers' rights to form trade unions, and criticized both the laissez-faire capitalism and socialism. This document served as a foundational role in the history of the Catholic corporatism that would provide support for conservative trade unions and their politically radical rivals. In the years following the Rerum Novarum, Catholic political parties, such as the Austrian Christian Social Party, would tend to drift in a corporatist direction. Following the fall of the Austrian Empire and the October Revolution in Russia, and if anyone knows what month this happened in, comment below. Figures in the Christian Social Party would become radicalized against its social democratic opponents, advocating for an end to parliamentary democracy and the replacement of the First Austrian Republic with a corporate or Sanderstadt. The Christian schools, Landbund and Heimwehr, paramilitary organizations, would collaborate to the end of Austrian democracy in 1933, ushering in a period of corporatist dictatorship commonly referred to as Austrofascism. So we will see. I think this is a little bit of new art. We will get this corporatist movement going. Historically, the Austrofascist takeover occurred towards the very tail end of our period under a Republican Austria that had lost its empire. However, one may argue that the rise of Austrofascism did not necessarily require such a cataclysm. Cataclysm is such a fun word to say. The tendencies which would lead to the Austrofascist were endemic to the Christian Social Party, and anti-democratic sentiments were hardly unknown in Austria-Hungary. The extension of the universal male suffrage law in 1907, a measure implemented due to general strikes supported by the Social Democratic Party, created a great deal of resentment in the Austro-conservative circles and the military. The Austrian military pushed for a law which included widespread wartime powers, allowing for direct control of the production by the military. Yikes. We don't like it when they do that. These laws, in combination with the Article of 1867 Constitution permitting for rule by decree, we hate that too, in a harshly reactionary military establishment, led to a state of military dictatorship in Austria following the outbreak of the First World War. A transition from a unitary Austrian Empire to an enlarged Ständerstaat is thus not entirely implausible. So There's our justification. Here's our journal entry. It is kind of hinged around the corporatist movement here. And so let's continue. The standard set of journal entry is available for a democratic Austria that is neither formed the dual or triple monarchy nor federated. Once this is active, one may choose to combat the rising corporatist threat or embrace the agenda. Now, corporatist is generally a pretty solid ideology. So, and the corporatist law is just absolutely insane, giving the extra... company limit. So if one chooses to embrace the corporatist project and get a sympathetic figurehead as head of state, one may immediately transition to a single party state with a button to represent, can you do single party corporatist? I think you can. To represent the fatherland's front, I'm getting the system of power and the method by which they solve it kind of conflated, but I'm pretty sure you can have a corporatism and single party state. To represent the fatherland's strange nebulous identity, this button will transition whatever political party the head of state belongs to into the fatherland front. This means that one may have a fatherland front with a conservative, agrarian, militaristic, fascistic, or Catholic flavor depending on the party which formed it. We will eliminate the parliament. Once this is enacted, a set of corporatist laws and repressed socialist Austria once one has enacted a set of corporatist laws and repressed the socialist, Austria will be successfully reorganized in the Standardstaat, which is going to be, we get a little bit of some art for this. Again, this art is new and it looks nice. What modifiers are we going to get? Okay. I mean, we don't know what the clicking does. We didn't get to hover the tooltip. We didn't have the technology. We are aware that there's a heated debate amongst historians whether the Fatherland Front was truly fascist or not. Austrofascism itself is not a controversial term. We have designated this content to be agnostic to this question. To draw a sharp line between the realms of fascism and not fascism posits a clean qualitative difference between the two, which is a questionable thesis at best. I mean, you're not wrong, but we do like calling the fascists too, so... Okay. We believe in taking a descriptive approach. The Fatherland Front must be assessed according to its real character and not what labels may be applied to it from on high. Fair enough. The Hungarian Revolution. The Hungarian Revolution was one of the more spectacular occurrences of the 1848 revolutions. Beginning as a lawful revolution from reform-inclined Hungarian magnates from a better position within the Austrian Empire, it has evolved to a full-scale war for independence lasting for more than a year and necessitating Russian intervention to defeat. The Hungarian Revolution journal entry for Hungary allows for one to pursue the same ends with the historical Hungarian revolutionaries did. A liberal, modern Hungarian nation-state, either independent or occupying an autonomous, untouchable position within the Habsburg Empire. I wonder you get to play as Hungary and go for this. I mean, I assume you do. There are unique interactions in this journal entry. Here, let's actually just take a closer look at what completes it. We get promulgate 12 points, proclaim union with Transylvania, establish Hohenwald army, and we will complete if owns all of Hungarian homelands, is not a subject, is not a personal union, allows for voting, does not have any variant of serfdom, does not have land-based, does not have any variant of traditionalism. So this must be from game start. GDP of Hungary is greater than 6 million. That's not too bad. We've taken the decision to found Budapest. Okay. The unique interactions in this journal entry will allow the Hungarian player to rapidly liberalize at the cost of major rift with Austria. One will want to time one's political revolution carefully, as it will be televised, or it won't be, who knows, at a time when Austrians are otherwise occupied, such as, for example, the springtime of the peoples. We get the Hungarian spring, and we enable wowza, census suffrage, which I think is probably better than universal. Tenant farmers, pretty solid. Freedom of conscience and church state, National Guard, per capita taxation, and intervention. Wow. You just click the button and get all the things, huh? Not all necessarily all the best things, but all the things. Those things be thangin'. Even if one can push through one's reforms at an advantageous time, the Austrian Empire is certainly certain to not be in a crisis forever. To establish the Honved army interaction allows one to prepare for the inevitable Austrian reprisal by assembling a solid, well-motivated conscript army of one's own. So let's see what we get here. We have some requirements in order to be able to go for this, and what we will be getting is going to be on your feet, Magyar. That's such a good title. On your feet, Magyar. +5 proportional fervor for the Hungarian culture pops in Hungary. Extra government expenses, and we will choose one of the following for 5 years. Getting extra home defense, dug-in chance, camouflage chance. That's quite a lot. That's going to make it really hard to eat through that. Or we could get forward, minus morale loss, extra surprise maneuver, extra aggressive maneuver, and then it will get mustering the Honved for 5 years. Every Hungarian state with the enlistment efforts decree will get mustering the Honved for 5 years. Extra conscript with even more extra conscriptable battalions. Wow. That's gonna make you really kind of a big deal, huh? Now, does this automatically give us either mass conscription or the conscript heavy thing where we get 100 on the max conscripts? If it does, then this represents a huge amount of conscripts. Even on Pro Army, this is still going to be a lot of conscripts, though. The enthusiastic Magyarism programs pursued by the Hungarian revolutionaries, however, are certain to spike dissent. Historically, these policies led to minority populations of Hungary sided with Austrian imperial forces during Hungary's independence war. A war that drags on for too long may lead to these minority-dominated territories breaking away and seeking status as autonomous crownlands within the Austrian Empire. So you gotta be quick, baby. Successfully securing the Hungarian independence will allow one to choose a monarch from various noble houses of Europe, from Romanov to Orleans. It looks like we can choose someone to take the throne here. And then we have National Awakening, for which the DLC is going to be named, where we will active if Hungary has researched, or no, I think that this is going to be available on like all the Balkan states too, but okay. We'll activate if we have researched nationalism, does not have a variant of a subjecthood enacted, so not the monarch-oriented one, and has at least one of these, has to have a personal union or protectorate, and so we will get, if activated, we will get plus 50% support separatism strength. So that's going to be useful for getting these breakaway states to try and join Hungary. National Awakening journal entry represents the efforts of the various Balkan nations to develop their national identities. It is available to all Balkan nations which have researched nationalism. Yep, this is kind of what we were thinking. Have non-subjected citizenship law and have achieved a certain degree of independence from their overlord. It revolves around increasing one's own cultural fervor and achieving independence, which we learned about cultural fervor, I think, 2 Dev Diaries ago here. So we will have this journal entry going, and the fervor is affected by our literacy, the quantity of academics, countries' research in nationalism, pan-nationalism, average acceptance, independent or formally independent Hungarian countries. If I recall correctly, if you get rid of all the countries, this really stamps down fervor, and it is the presence of these other countries which can get nationalistic that really is a big driver here. And so if you're annexed, the Hungarian fervor goes away or down. The journal entry creates a National Awakening map marker, and when it is enabled and is occupied by numerous events, all of them with a theme of developing a country's nationality. So we have the National Epic, which is, of course, a toast to our luminaries. We will have One Nation, One People. I read this One Nation, One Purple. Shout out to Tyre. Shout out to Phoenicia. Shout out to Alexander. But we must indeed become Hungarians. And then once this journal entry is completed, a nation may leverage their newly found sense of identity to place claims on what they consider to be their cultural homelands, setting up the stage for conflicts to come. Our favorite. We have additional free content as well. But wait, there's more. This has been quite a long infomercial, though. Update 1.10 brings a tremendous amount of free content to the game. Our previous journal entry, or previous dev diary, rather, addressed this free content, yet did not quite manage to cover everything. This section includes 2 new free additions to the game, the National Awakening map marker and the Colonial Slavery Law. I wonder if they didn't have space or if they've since added these. That's kind of a little bit of a curious thing. I mean, she's saying it like they didn't have space. But is there, like, a hard limit on how long they can make these things? Or maybe it's just not having enough time to write about it. But, okay. Actually, no, they did have markers before. They just didn't show them off. So I guess they just didn't have time and or space. Update 1.10 brings a new use of the map to the game, the National Awakening marker. A National Awakening marker highlights the epicenter of a nation's national awakening, the point at which a nation's literary culture reaches critical mass and catalyzes a rapid and increase in national consciousness. An example of a historical national awakening would be the Croatian National Revival, in which the Croatian nationalists released a number of vernacular publications, is there any other kind, of note using the newly developed Croatian written language. A culture may have a national awakening, one national awakening per game. National awakenings can occur when a culture reaches 30 cultural fervor. A national awakening will catalyze the formation of a national movement, increase the attraction to cultural movements, making it so that they're more likely to try and break away, or, if this is within your nation, more likely to prefer nationalistic types of laws, and further increase fervor while it's active. A multinational empire, a subject having its national awakening, is something to keep an eye on. With a subject having a national awakening. So we're talking about Austria here. And pictured the Habsburgs' nightmare mode, simultaneous national awakenings for every nationality in Europe. In the empire, sorry, not in Europe. And yikes, big yikes. As one can see, we have also changed the culture and religion map modes to use stripes to highlight considerable size minorities. Do like this quite a lot. And then we have colonial slavery. At the game start, many European nations had either banned or chosen not to recognize the institution of slavery in their mainland territories while maintaining institutions of their colonies overseas. The colonial slavery law represents the state of affair, allowing countries to safely cordon the institution of slavery off from the prying eyes of respectable citizens. Respectable citizens? You're trying to say them in the colonies ain't respectable? This law functions as debt slavery in unincorporated states and slavery banned in incorporated states. While this law is this law is active to discriminated pops with low standards of living in unincorporated states will slowly become enslaved. Yay! Debt slavery would actually be decent if there wasn't like this weird SOL kind of like bug, or I don't know how to describe it, but what ends up happening is slaves, SOL just gets hyperpolarized. It's either 1 or like 8 or 12. And if their SOL is 1, it's just bad. If it's 8 or 12, it's probably just good because the amount of workforce ratio you get on slaves is very high. But that's a little bit of a digression. But one of the issues is you can't go multiculturalism, but that is increasingly less of an issue. And technically you can go multiculturalism, debt slavery. And so in theory you could go multiculturalism, colonial, this. And that is all. Thank you for reading. You're welcome. Next week, we will continue our cover the paid narrative content contained in National Awakening. So, we did get the Happy Wednesday, the Happy Thursday with the capitalization. We did not get the Happy Thursday sandwich, though. But this is, I believe, our first capitalized Happy Thursday from Victoria, unless I'm horribly mistaken. Lino gives us the sandwiches. This is just like a cookie. But it's a very delightful cookie. And with that, if you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Use the notification bell, do these types of things. And other than that, have a Happy Thursday.